All right, moving along, let's talk a bit about sales calls because there are some specific tips that I can share around this topic as well. So on the sales call side of things, the first key goal is to understand who you're trying to reach out to. Um, Generally, the same concept applies as to email outreach as well. You're trying to, with the sales call, ask for permission to continue the conversation. That's really all that you're trying to do. But there are some things that are unique to a sales call specifically. So number one is identifying who you need to reach out to. And then on the second level then is once you know who you're reaching out to, you want to see if you can identify a sort of an indirect contact, which would mean like a referral or an introduction that you can get from someone. If you can go that route, that is more preferred because if you're able to say that, hey, someone referred you, the person that you're calling is more likely to engage because they will, number one, trust the person that is referring you, and number two, not want to damage their reputation with that referee, right? Number two, the other option is to then either maybe you got that cold meeting with them, the cold call because you send them an email, or you just directly call outreach, right? So in the sales call, assuming this is your first call, this is what the rough flow usually looks like. The first few seconds is setting some context, right? How do you find them? Why are you reaching out to them? Then you go into that intro, you explain why you are calling, and you help them understand what's in it for them to continue a conversation. And then you try to close with a follow-on meeting. And the follow-on meeting is the longer, more comprehensive actual meeting. So very similar format to the sales, the email outreach, which we already covered. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here. One thing that is unique to sales calls is sometimes you may be met with what we call gatekeepers. So if you're calling an executive, perhaps they will have an executive assistant or maybe secretary, what have you. There's generally a gatekeeper for upper management for most companies. There are some tricks that you can use, but I don't generally recommend them because if your goal is to work with this client long time, it's actually more beneficial for you to build a good relationship with the gatekeeper rather than try to circumvent them. Make sense? Yeah. So calling before after hours, that will usually get you straight to them as opposed to going through the gatekeeper because the gatekeeper is not present. But yeah, if you can respect the gatekeeper, build a relationship with them, and they can help bridge that referral, it's going to actually be a lot more valuable. Make sense? So gatekeepers are not stupid. Like if you sneak around them, if you sneak past them, they catch wind of it, then they will make it a lot harder for you to get in front of this person in the future. So try instead to kind of do the more valuable route, although it takes a bit more time. In the call, or at least before you jump into the call, you want to make sure that you do your research, right? You want to make sure that you're not wasting time asking qualifying questions if you can already find out that information. You want to kind of understand mentally how you will kind of move in the conversation depending on how people respond. So for example, if it goes straight to voicemail, what should you say? If a gatekeeper answers, what would you say in that situation? If they answer and if they're not interested, how do you respond, right? If they answer and they don't have time, but they want to book a meeting, how do you ask for the meeting? If they answer and they are open to listening right now, you better be able to pitch right away as well. So you need to have these potential options thought out so that they don't catch you off guard. And when you meet with that situation, you don't just end up like blurring things off the top of your mind, because that's often not going to be the most polished presentation, right? So prepare different responses depending on the possible answers or comments that they might make, or what kind of situation you might find yourself in. If they ask things like, "How are you different from other competitors?" If they raise certain objections, if they ask you more about what does working with you look like, if do they have certain things that they're familiar with, certain jargon, certain industry knowledge, right? Certain expectations. So just make sure that you can plan all of that ahead of time. That's why a lot of the the planning process, even though you don't necessarily need to stick to a script, just the act of planning out the script will help you a lot because it'll help you understand how to respond to different situations, right? So during the call then, the kind of frame of mind is to primarily focus less on pitching and more about troubleshooting and helping. If you are able to do it, then it's not going to become a sales pitch. It's not going to be too pushy, right? Instead of focusing on would you be interested in, which is more about like giving them something, it's more like, hey, would you be open to discussing this? Make it more collaborative. Find fit, focus on qualifying, assessing instead of concentrating on making the sale, because it doesn't all have to happen in one interaction. You want to build a relationship and then eventually move towards a close. Rarely will a sales call convert in the first call as well. So build a script, but you don't have to depend on it, right? If you are booking follow-on calls to kind of get in front of the right decision makers, or maybe there's a follow-on meeting, you want to try possible to book those follow-on calls during the call, like I mentioned before, so you avoid some of that back and forth trying to set up a time. People generally procrastinate when it comes to following up as well. And for those follow-on calls, make sure you have the right people in the room if you're not already speaking to one, right? So you may ask questions like, who needs to be involved to make this happen? How can we get them interested? If the person you're speaking to is interested, then you can ask them to be your advocate to help you get the right people in the room and kind of move towards closing, right? Obviously, if the people that you're speaking to sincerely believe that you're adding value, they will want to advocate for you. They will want to get the support from their organization. After the call, what do you do? When you hang up, you want to basically follow up with an email summary. And this summary should include kind of covering your kind of key needs, challenges, opportunities, and kind of outlining how you can help, outlining the roadmap for implementation, timeline, those kind of things, and what are clear next steps and call to actions. Obviously, thank them for their time, and make sure it's very clear for them to understand how do they move on with it. If they don't answer the call, then you also need to have that backup, right? What are you going to say when you leave that voicemail? And not only do you leave the voicemail, you also send a follow-up email or message after the voicemail as a follow-up to that. Last thoughts, just kind of some other ideas. Generally, in and around cold calling, a lot of people are very uncomfortable with this because it is outbound. It is interruptive in nature. So you're getting in front of a customer. So most people will feel, especially if they've never done cold calling, very uncomfortable around it. And I will say cold calling is not easy. But once you get over the initial fear of getting started, you'll find that there's actually really nothing scary about it. It's just a process. It's just something to do. What we generally fear is we fear uncertainty and we fear rejection. By building this process around what to do, how to call, how often to call, protocols in terms of what to do if no one picks up, if nobody answers, if you get rejected, that process takes away all the uncertainty and it gives us a clear idea of how to proceed, right? It makes it a lot more comfortable. And not only does the process help with navigating call, you want to build the process into your schedule as well, right? You want to make sure that they're committing regular time every week to doing certain sales related activities, not only cold calling, but maybe even cold email outreach or what have you. We tend to generally procrastinate more with daunting tasks like cold calling, cold outreach, and it often will, if we don't build a process around it, it will tend to be pushed to the side of our desk and it's not a priority. And we find that sometimes we miss those sales goals because we don't make it a habit of doing so. So make sure that you're consistently doing sales, create a kind of system in terms of how and when you'll do outreach so that you don't find yourself in those kind of cyclical or lumpy revenue situations where you have a lot of customers and then you get busy and then you don't do any sales and then you have no customers for a period of time and then you scramble to get sales again and then you have too many customers again. So by having that process, it just ensures that there's going to be stability in terms and predictability in terms of revenue. Make sense? So I want to leave you with this video. I'm not going to play it here, but I will. There's a link to it, and it will be in the playlist as well. I really love this video because Jia here in his video, he talks a bit about his lessons and his journey through experimenting with rejection. And I think it's very relevant here with sales calls because people who do cold calling get rejected a lot. So definitely give this a watch, and I think you'll really enjoy it.